Hi, everyone. Today I have with me Dr. Tara Guzzo, naturopathic doctor who is really passionate about resilience and an all-around amazing human being. Welcome, Tara. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Anne. I really appreciate you having me here today. I'm excited to have this conversation with you and also to share a lot of value with your audience as well.
hmm So first things first, tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Sure thing. So, I am both a naturopathic doctor and a registered acupuncturist practicing in Ontario. And I've been practicing for over a decade now. And it's been so fun. And I really, really do love what I do. And I primarily work with women. That's my main focus in practice is women's health. So women who are tired, who are stressed, who are feeling anxious, and they want to regain calm, confidence, and all day energy back. So that is my primary focus. And I do that through my Resilient Woman formula that I apply to assessment and treatment of these women in an individualized way. And I came to naturopathic medicine at a time where I was actually suffering from burnout, total exhaustion, and I was having really debilitating chronic symptoms. And I had been to many doctors, specialists. I'd gone through the use of pharmaceuticals and even surgeries, and none of them entirely resolved my concerns. So then I found out about naturopathic medicine, and that's when I was finally asked the in depth questions that no one else was asking. And I started to see some change and some gain and progress in my health that eventually helped me resolve the concerns that I was dealing with at the time.
And that's such a common story, right? Like in terms of the obviously the narrative is different, but that was my story too, right? Like coming to naturopathic medicine because we weren't able to find the answers in those short appointments in conventional care. Conventional care has a huge value, but there's oftentimes not enough time to dig deeper into the lifestyle changes, the dietary changes, and really putting the whole picture together.
Yeah, it's
Um,
true. It's something that I've heard a lot from my colleagues, and it's something that I hear day in and day out from my new patients. Like they're often in the same boat. And I remember, being in that same place, over 17 years ago now.
Yeah. Okay. So I know you're passionate about resilience and you brought up your resilience program. So let's start by talking about what resilience is and what does it look like?
Absolutely. I think that this is so important to define because there's actually a lot of common misconceptions about resilience. So, resilience, the best definition that I have is that it's a capacity to prepare for, to recover from, and to adapt to stress, challenge, and change. So, those three components are really, really critical because so often there's elements of that that are missed.
hmm And we are recording this during, COVID-19 physical distancing times. So how can we stay resilient during this time? What are some of the strategies that you're using in your life?
This is a really great question. And what I want to say first is that um, maybe I'll cover a couple of the misconception pieces because it'll feed into what my answer is.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I don't want to spoil it. So the first thing is that um, some people think that they're born with resilience or they're not. So they define it almost as if it's a character trait. But the truth is that we all have the capacity for resilience. It is built into our DNA just by virtue of how our bodies and our minds function. So, as a really simple example, if you get a paper cut on your finger, you don't have to sit there and intentionally think about it. Or, if you have no resilience as a trait, then you're not going to heal from that. Well, you absolutely are. But then there's also limitations sometimes. So, someone who maybe has a limitation on their resilience if they are experiencing diabetes, then they may heal slower. Or if someone has a higher level of health and maybe they're not suffering from a chronic health condition, they might heal more rapidly. So I think it's important to understand that resilience is something we're all born with. It's actually in our DNA, but then you can also increase your resilience. So some of the things that I've been doing are interestingly though we're in a crisis right now, you don't need a crisis to develop resilience. So a lot of the things that I've already been doing in my everyday life, like eating healthily and exercising, the self-care practices that I do, are the same things that are carrying me through this time right now. And I think it's true to understand that so often people think about resilience as a bounce back piece. So how can you be resilient right now? Well, you can't. We have to wait till we're bouncing back from this, but it's not true. I would argue that the preparation piece is actually the most important. And so that's part of the definition that quite often goes missed. At this time is when your resilience level is being tested, and then you can make choices and changes in order to step up and become more resilient. So definitely my routine looks totally different now. So some of the things that I've been using as coping strategies, I've had to, with working in my home office, I've had to have a lot more communication around time and space boundaries at home, which has been really helpful. And then in working in my home office, I'm someone who can get ultra focused and be really absorbed in my work. But that's not healthy to do for really long stretches like I have right now. So I've set up using alarm systems that help trigger a change in my schedule. So, okay, I'm going to do this task for 1 hour. I'm going to set an alarm, and I'm going to do maybe some foam rolling or fascial rolling or something to really help support my body, because after an hour of sitting, it is time for a break. And then also I use my alarm system for triggering when I actually need to be back in my office. Again, so I just continuously set alarms throughout the day that help trigger when I need to change what I'm doing. I've been practicing my own resilience techniques day in and day out. And then I've been taking longer nature walks than usual, which is already part of my routine, but I have more time, so I'm doing more of that. And now, without having the social connection in person with friends and family and colleagues like I normally do, I've had a lot of virtual calls going on. So, a lot of video chats in the past couple weeks or so.
Mhm. And I liked how you touched on resilience from not just a bounce back from, but also to prepare for and to tap into at any time, really. So, what are some of the tools that you use that help build resilience in times of non-stress? So, like right now, we're in a huge period of stress, or distress, if you want to call it that. From our in our day-to-day lives, when things are pretty, obviously they're still up and down, but overarching picture is pretty, constant almost. What can people do on a day-to-day basis to kind of tap into that muscle of building resilience and having a resilient mind and body?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy to share on this. So I want to expand a little bit on a practice that I implemented after I went through a major trauma last year. And this was something that just, it really helped ground me. And before I would do it here and there, but it just, it wasn't the same and it wasn't intentional. So what I decided to do was, I needed to really nurture resilience within myself and dig deeper than I ever had before. So I wanted to find an intentional practice that would help me do that, because I noticed that stress was really creeping in and I wanted to keep it at bay. I wanted to stay as like calm and confident as I could be during that time. So what I did was I gave myself a 7-day challenge, because I knew if I said, okay, I'm going to do this forever, I'm human just like everyone else, and that can feel like an overwhelming task to commit to something to do every day for the rest of your life. So instead, I said, I'm going to give myself a 7-day challenge of going for a walk every single day in the morning, and minimum 15 minutes. I could go more if I want to, but a minimum of 15 minutes. And I gave myself a couple other things to do along with that. So I wanted to, instead of, starting my day in a stress state, I wanted to intentionally cultivate an emotion. So I chose the emotion of awe, because whenever I'm in nature and I'm observing different things, I feel that sense, but I wanted to really connect to it more. And the emotion of awe has been associated with really positive outcomes in terms of physical, emotional, and mental benefits. So it's something that I was really drawn to doing, and I could pair that together. The other piece that it accomplished for me was that I was doing mindful movement. So I was walking, and that movement really helped me as well. So I paired together movement, and then also the nature time, and intentionally cultivating awe. And one other little descriptive piece about that I did was I decided that to cultivate that emotion, I was going to take pictures of things in nature throughout my walk. So a minimum of 3 photos of something in nature that inspired awe for me. So some days that was, like a chipmunk that I saw, or the pattern that was formed by the ice, or seeing how pine needles are attached to the branch in this like really geometric pattern. So these are the types of things that I did to really help um, cultivate that emotion very intentionally so that I could be resilient. So it was a great resilience strategy that touched on so many points for me.
That sounds like such an easily translatable strategy for so many people, right? Like you did it in nature, and I'm like you. I love nature. I find a lot of inspiration and awe in nature as well. And I followed you along when you were doing that, and I loved all your pictures. But we can cultivate that. It's also being mindful, right? So we can cultivate that in any activity that we're doing. We can do that while we're sitting with our family and coloring or eating, being in awe of how like the flavors come together with food, and how everything feels in the mouth. And there's so many ways to do that, and we just forget about it sometimes. So setting this intention becomes so important around it, and we can pick any kind of you picked awe. We can pick any sort of emotion or feeling associated with that. I love that. It's simple, but it's effective, and it's also manageable. You set yourself up for 7 days. How long did you end up doing it for?
Well, I'm still doing it now, and
Perfect.
it was something even like during that time. I play soccer, and I encountered a bit of a minor knee injury where for a couple days I couldn't walk. But I was like, you know what, I'm committed to this. So instead, I went and sat in the backyard. So I did that instead. And another day I did meditation on my walk. So I did a guided walking meditation that I got for free online, and I did that while I was walking. So I've varied it up a little bit so that I could keep consistent with it and really enjoy it. And even the times where it felt like not possible to do, I found a way to do it anyway.
Okay. So now let's talk about, so you had this practice that you cultivated and you're continuing with. What does that feel like for you and for the women you work with? What does resilience look like? What does it feel like?
That's a great question too, because this is really individual and looks different for every woman. But maybe I can give some examples. So this could look like a woman who walks through my door and is experiencing a lot of stress and anxiety, perhaps some digestive symptoms, some menstrual concerns. And as we start to walk through, the assessment, starting to gain insights about what is happening in terms of body systems, how they're interconnected, how this scenario was created based on medical history, that kind of thing. So that is even a piece, like having that knowledge and that empowerment is something that can help you get on the path of having more resilience. And being committed to working on your health is also one of the fundamental mindsets about resilience too, because truly health is a vehicle to anything you want to do in your life. And you know this if you've ever been down and out and felt ill, even for a short period of time, but particularly if it's been an extended period of time, canceled social plans because you're too exhausted to go out, maybe a trip you're really looking forward to that you can't go on, not being able to be as productive like in your work and getting as much fulfillment out of it because you're exhausted and stressed all the time. So resilience can look like a journey that has multiple levels. And the assessment piece is really important. And as you move through, integrating various practices in terms of your health. And I really look at 4 levels of health for any woman that I work with, which is the resilient woman formula. So the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical aspects are things that I consider. So journey to resilience can look different in terms of like, the individual pieces of how does that come together. But in the end, it adds up to a sense of empowerment where you feel like no matter what inevitable life stresses show up and whatever challenges come your way, you feel like you have the resources, the community, the support, the tools to be able to move through that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we've all, like you said, we've all experienced, feeling down and not being able to do things. And when, for me, resilience looks like what you said, so have feeling like I can accomplish it despite all the obstacles in my way, because inevitably we're going to have obstacles in life. That's a given. So I really like that explanation. And what gets in our way? What gets in our way of developing and creating resilience, or if we've implemented strategies from continuing on with them?
Sure. So, one, I would say the opting out mindset where you think that it's something you're not capable of, because if you don't think you're capable of resilience because you weren't born with it, then it's not even a discussion to be had. So, that is one thing. And another is not understanding the preparation piece as being the most critical, because that will dictate how you bounce back from a particular stress, challenge, or change in your life. And I think, another issue with respect to that um, could really be, hmm, yeah, I'm not sure. I would say those two for sure are some considerations to think about.
Hmm. Yeah, and I guess it's also natural ebb and flow, right? I
Mhm.
do a lot, as you know, I do a lot of menstrual work. I find that people tend to be a little bit more resilient in those first 3 weeks of their cycle, and then the last week resilience goes down, and it's almost a snowball effect because like energy tanks a little bit. Um,
Mhm.
Lifestyle choices and self-care habits also tank at the same time, and that is a snowball effect of not feeling our greatest. And having a robust system around it. I like your alarm schedule. I get my patients to do a lot of alarms as well, and myself as well. There's Because we all have stuff to do in life. We all forget things, and if things aren't scheduled in intentionally, oftentimes we're like, oh, we don't need to do that, right? Things just go by the wayside.
So true. I like what you said too. And I guess I would add to that, similar along the similar lines of thinking that not having the systems or support or accountability in place, because as humans, we're going to go through periods of challenge and we may feel like we're experiencing failure at times. But if we have the right systems in place, whether that's an alarm to trigger a particular behavior, or an understanding and acknowledgement of where we're at on our cycle and what maybe we need to be doing at that time, how we need to be shifting our focus, or if we don't have the right accountability and support to really enable us to do the things that better our health and resilience, then we're just not going to follow through.
For sure, and I like how you said that we're going to face obstacles, and even developing habits. There is an element of failure that we kind of need to set our expectations around. That it's very normal to have a little bit of a falling off the bandwagon in that process of creating a new habit or creating a new system or creating a new schedule. And
Mhm.
when we prepare ourselves for it and we know that it's normal and that everyone goes through it, I know you go through it, I know I go through it, it really makes a big difference because sometimes I have patients who say, oh, my vice is chips. I know you must not eat chips. And I'm like, I eat chips. I'm like, I try not to eat them all the time. And there are definitely periods of time where I eat more chips. But like I'm human too. And sometimes we look at these people who we look up to and think that they're doing everything perfectly all the time when that's not the case. So definitely building some strategies around an accountability. I love that. Having an accountability, whether that's something you do individually or with other people, is really important from a support perspective, but also from a motivation perspective, because motivation is not constant either, right?
Exactly, exactly. So we need to fill in those gaps, and support really makes a difference.
Yes, exactly. So, do you have any favorite resources or tips or books, podcasts, anything along those lines that you recommend to the people in your life, to your patients to help build resilience and to kind of develop that muscle?
Sure. Well, one of the main resources that I love so much, because this is where I've done a lot of my specific clinical resilience training, is through the Heart Math Institute. And they have some really wonderful information about resilience. They've done a lot of research on it for the past probably about 30 years now. So they have a pretty robust site where there's a lot of free, valuable information. They have great videos.
Mhm.
So that's a main resource. If your audience is looking for something really practical to start, I created a free guide called The Mindset of the Resilient Woman. And it's a free playbook that gives 10 different mindsets that are really essential to developing more resilience in your life and increasing that capacity. And then along with it, there's a number of worksheets that are delivered to help you to implement those mindsets.
Perfect. I will definitely link that in the description to this video. And Tara, before we finish, where can people find you? Where do you hang out? How can people connect with you?
Sure. So I hang out a lot on Instagram. I'm on Facebook too. And in both places, you can find me at Dr. Tara Guzzo ND. So Dr. Tara Guzzo ND.
Perfect. Again, I will also link those in the description so everyone can find you easily. Thank you so much, Tara, for being here. I appreciate, and I'm sure my audience appreciates all the wisdom that you've imparted. I hope that you take good care of yourself during this physically distanced COVID-19 time.
Yes, thank you so much again for having me. And thank you to your audience for tuning in. And yes, you take good care of everyone as well.